So again, thank you for helping us, both by participating, studying, meditating. Sangha, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the three jewels, very important. Each one is very important. Continue to help us if you can. Concepts rule when you grasp on your thoughts and ideas, emotional dynamics that are reinforced by that structure, that warp and woof of I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it shouldn't be that way. Why is this happening? Where is this happening? Who is this? Who am I? What am I doing? Is this really working? On and on. Questioning. Not even waiting for an answer particularly. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the conceptual area is just constantly answering everything. Well, it's because of this. It's because of, well, if she hadn't, then I wouldn't have. Built all kinds of little tiny, you could say little building blocks, and they are, because there's so many of them. As we were driving in this morning, we're looking at all these incredible leaves, all the different shades of death. You don't get much of a warning other than you start to turn orange and then you fall off your limb. But you can't, even just in your vision, you cannot count the number of separate situations: a leaf, a bug, a bird, a dog, a cat, a human being. You cannot count how many of them are right in front of you all the time. And they're not separate, but they certainly look separate. It's interesting, when we look at a tree, we just see a tree, but if we look closely, we see lots of leaves, branches, differentiation, and then the desire around that to get part of it, keep away another part of it. This is what the human mind is doing. That's why we're so brilliant. That's why we're able to build anti-gravity machines. Have we done that yet? You don't know? Aren't you Google? Well, we're coming pretty close to that kind of thing. So what is being emphasized, as I said earlier, same talk over and over, watch the movement. See, how can I say this? How can we say this? Watch the movement as you're walking from the kitchen to the whatever, if you have a dining room. Just watch the movement of the mind around any particular story that's possibly arising, and there probably is one. It may be something like, where did I put my pen or my glasses? Maybe something like that. But notice the kind of argumentative nature that the consciousness has of wanting to be in control, wanting to know relatively what's happening. I could say it this way: we sacrifice the incredible spaciousness of our world by closing down on a self that wants that, or somebody identified with this body-mind complex that doesn't need this, but needs more of that. Constant stories going on, reinforcing. Interestingly, they're probably relatively true. We actually have proof. You could take it to court, maybe. Did you take it to court? Could take a lot of things. A lot of things would hold up. Well, they did this, therefore. We get caught in that circular loop that looks so reasonable, so logical, so rational, so fair. So it is it's like a wall of concepts. It's the initial situation as it first arises is pretty clear. It's open, it's spacious, and then we immediately start adding on. We start throwing pepper and salt on everything, so we can't really taste what's right in front of us as it actually is. We want to put some mental condiments on it to keep it from being too close, keep its distance. It's a little salty, but I like it that way. A constant chatter, albeit on a very low level. You cannot find no self. Why? Because there isn't one. You can't find the experience of no self will not be an experience. It couldn't be. So if you get that far in where you're actually looking for no self, you probably will come right back into a self, which is still unreal. If you're a strong meditator, if you're meditating every day, when I say meditate, I'm saying the way I teach this, the way I talk about it, may be different than what you do, and I'm not here to change you into some other style. My understanding is hold still, sit symmetrical, and watch the movement of the mind come and go, or go and not come back for a while, or then we fall asleep, and then we get entrained into some kind of a conversation with someone in our mind, our idea of someone, what they might say if we said this or that. Just observe that. Don't stop anything. Don't fluff anything up. And don't shut down. Those are the three poisons. Don't turn away, distract yourself into something else. But if you do any of those three, then you're still a meditator, you're still meditating, then just observe yourself doing that. Don't interfere with what the mind is doing by saying, well, I shouldn't be. And if you say I shouldn't be, then you don't go back into saying, well, I shouldn't say shouldn't. It's just quite a mess, it can be. The important thing there, as I see it, you may see it differently, people do, is however this feels, the emotional part of it actually is very difficult for the conceptual mind, the thinking mind, the processing mind, the analytical mind, the logical mind to cover up the emotional dynamic. But when the emotional dynamic is in the service of belief in a separate self who's having the emotion, and what do we have? We have confusion, we have circularity, we have right and wrong and up and down. We have our entire culture, our society, different forms of it. It's a little bit different in Japan or in China or in Tehran. You're going on as you already know about this. It has to be seen. And when I say that, I want to make sure that I also say that if you see it, and I don't know how else to say this, if you have questions in this area, come and get me. Let's do this together. But if you see this, you won't know it. Because the very nature of seeing is without a self, of wisdom. If there's anyone there, the wise guy, the wise woman, if there's something imputed, there must, if I'm knowing something, I'm seeing something, there must be somebody. No, it's better than that, and it's worse than that. It's better than that because you're liberated. It's worse than that because it won't feel like it. This is why we have something like the vow to be with all things, or the vow to save all beings. It's why it's just somebody understood this a long time ago and could see that this would be what's an impediment? Is that the correct word? Impediment, or is it impediment? Peter Pan. Not Peter Pan. The seeing is without anyone seeing it. It takes a while. If you have some questions, please bring them up. If not, I'll continue to talk. Yokodo, go ahead. I can see her reaching forward. That's all I know. She's about to ask a question.
Yokodo bowing. I was still trying to formulate a question, but it's around whether having seen through self and not knowing it because there's no one who sees through self, is that a conclusion one might come to later? Bowing.
I don't know. My later has not run out yet. Is yours? Interesting way to ask about it later. The later is gone, the before is gone. So there is no persona. So therefore that so-called area of consciousness may appear outrageous, may appear correct in some ways and completely off the mark in other areas. More, please. Keep coming.
Gyokuro bowing. If one sees through self but hasn't seen through other, is that not yet liberation? Bowing.
Not yet. Which implies later, which we're right back to the same circularity. But again, this is very important. It's so very simple. It's very, very important. It is important to see the circularity without stopping it, without getting rid of it, without using that as a, well, I see that I'm being circular, without using that as a justification to reinforce the very wise ego that is about to attain realization. It's as I said, it's worse than that. It's everything is coming apart, and it is not comfortable at all. And so the only reference point that, maybe it's not the only one, I'm sure there are maybe hundreds, dozens more anyway, but is come back to the first noble truth. Life is suffering. If you're alive, you're going to suffer. Yogido.
Gyokuro bowing. How do we stop looking for signs without just ignoring things?
Just notice that you're looking for signs. It's always about awareness. It's never about a success at doing this. I finally stopped looking for signs. Or so just be aware. If you're aware that you're looking for signs, if you're aware of the suffering, if you're aware of the activity of the mind that seems to be very, very confusing and is looking for someone who is confused, just look at the confusion. Just observe. Just be. Another way I've said this is just be whatever it is you're trying to get rid of, so that you have an intimate relationship with your emotions and your feelings. Very, very difficult. Andy.
If the mind never stops throwing up concepts, how do you see beyond the concepts?
You just have to see the concept. The concept is beyond. Seeing the concept is seeing beyond. It's when we grasp the concept or reject the concept or ignore the concept that we start to think everything starts to spin in some kind of a relative reality of up and down, back and forth, right and wrong, night and day, life and death, relative truth. We start to buy into that. We get caught on that. It's like you came to the carnival and you were just going to watch, but instead, the next thing you know, you're on the tilt-a-whirl. You don't know how you got on. You don't know who bought your ticket, but there you are. You know what a tilt-a-whirl is? It has a shell-like little, and they go up and they go down. That's where your stomach starts to get, and then it comes back up, and it's a little bit better, and back down again. Is that how you feel on it, or do you like rides?
I like rides.
Okay. I lost that one, I guess. Why? Don't you get sick?
No.
Okay. Well, that's probably why I didn't like them. It's entertainment for you. Further question?
Andy bowing. But if the concepts are a cover-up, and I don't know where I'm going with this, lost it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shoto.
Shoto bowing. When things are falling apart and it looks like, at least for me, that I'm less able to stop outflowing, like the protection's falling down, what is it to be kind when that's happening?
You could start by keeping your mouth shut. If you feel like you're going to be spitting on people, don't say anything. So it's the intention to be kind, not the success story. There will be no success story. If there is, we're right back to a high level of relative truth that looks absolute, because we kind of see that we don't outflow like our partner does, or we're a little bit more advanced than someone else. This is, what do I want to call it? Baloney. It's just not true. It's painful to see that. And it's also painful to realize that that may never go away. That we may continue to feel confused forever. More.
Shadow bowing. Might we continue to outflow forever?
Yes, but that's an advanced teaching. And you're not advanced yet, so I'm not going to give you that one. I guess I already did, didn't I? When I say, what am I saying? I'm being a little silly, but it takes a lot of sitting practice to see that you never had to leave to go somewhere else. It was always right here. It was right in your face all the time, and you kept, or me, or any of us, keep looking for something else, something else, something else. Most of the world is doing this. Have you met people in the rest of the world? A few of them. Notice that? Looking for something, looking, trying to find, trying to improve, trying to not outflow on others. More?
Shadow bowing. It's not a clear question, but something in the area of permission. It looks like I have a misunderstanding about that, or that I don't have permission to be an asshole. Is that a misunderstanding?
You're going to have to paraphrase that a little bit, otherwise I'm going to get wound up in the same thing you're asking about.
Shadow bowing. Just an example, one time you told me that, like, you're the teacher, so you can blow your stack, but I can't.
Yeah, that's true.
And I see myself continuing to blow my stack, so it looks like a
It's
misunderstanding.
awareness. Just be aware. Be aware. Just be aware of it. You don't have to get rid of an imaginary self. It's unreal. You just have to see that there is no solid being here or anywhere. It's both exhilarating and heartbreaking at the same time. And if even using the one of the original lies is there is such a thing as time. You have to do something about it. So this is what we're doing. More? Yes, sir.
Is having a willingness to let concepts rule a misunderstanding?
You really don't have any say-so about it as far as letting. So that's the word there that's just going to catch you. I'm just letting, because you'll kind of repeat that. It's more difficult than that. Not that that's so easy, but it's not just let. It's like you won't hear me say, at least not if I do it, I don't say it much, just let go. I might say, watch how you hang on, but don't necessarily let go, because then we do it conceptually. We just let concepts or let something, then the thinking mind is sliding in front of the awareness, so that you're no longer exposed by the complete unknowing that is in front of you. We don't know what this is. Unlikely that we ever will know. More? Don't stop. Okay, then stop. Did you stop? What happened? Did you let go? No. What happened? What did happen? Seriously, what is? Spit it out. What is it? That'll work. You don't know. I don't know either. Like I couldn't, if I knew I couldn't do this, I would be embarrassed and terrified to be up here if I knew anything at all. Yes.
You said earlier that you were talking about how we close down on basic spaciousness.
Yes, with concepts.
if the situation is basically spacious, I mean, how can we close down on it? Like, what is actually closing?
Just the illusion that there's someone who can stop or start or think this way or think that way or move in this direction or stop outflowing, any kind of conceptual relative truth area. And some people are extremely adept at working in that area, extremely good at working with relative truth, just relativity in general. But it's unreal. It's there and we use it, but it's not, the fundamental understanding is nothing is separate from anything else. If you realize that, then it's not even a that. It's like there, and it's been teachers down through the centuries have tried to, who have understood something and tried to say something about it, realize as soon as they start to say something about it, they're reinforcing the very illusion they are encouraging others to see through that they're seeing through, but there's no self seeing it. There's no being seeing it. Take your question further if you can.
That was a good bowing. Sorry.
Kelsey Bowing.
Kelsey?
Are there times where concepts are helpful in seeing the openness or the spaciousness?
Yeah, yes, yeah. We're not trying to get rid of concepts, just be aware when it's being used to, you could say, prevent you from seeing deeper into a situation, sometimes called a conclusion. If you don't come to conclusions, but impossible to not come to conclusions. They're just happening all the time. But if you try to put a tether on that, hold back on that a little bit, and that just using a visual idea there allows you to see the spaciousness around the conclusion. So just and actually seeing that you can't stop concluding is awareness. It's not, you haven't lost anything, you haven't failed at anything. And in that way, you get closer to seeing the unreality of an identity that would even hang on to something. More? Don't stop. Any other, especially questions in that area, if you have them, please. Go ahead.
Even Bowing, you mentioned to prevent you from seeing deeper into a situation. What is the deeper into a situation?
From the point of view of what is being looked at or examined or studied or Q&A about here is the fundamental nature of what this is, that looks like a relative situation where you can come and go. There's a building, there's doors, there's eyes, nose, tongue, body, mind, hands. We have the illusion of moving around in space. So to go deeper into that is to look at anything that looks like a solid being or person and notice the way you project onto them, project onto me as a teacher, or as a teacher that is a very good teacher, a teacher that's coming apart or getting dementia. Or look at your partner and see that there's a projection. You don't actually see who that is. You actually are looking at a facade that you've created, that you're creating. When I say you, I'm saying the consciousness is, there's really no identity doing that. But the consciousness, part of the consciousness, you could say it this way, is wrapped up in a ball of self-centeredness or narcissism or paranoia or worried about what else is going to happen, going to come or going to go. And sometimes that fear is so intense that we don't even know we're afraid. Most of the world does not know that they are operating out of fear. Fear of death, fear of dissolution, fear of coming apart, fear of being judged, fear of on and on. More?
Even Bowing, I'm wondering if at some point projections, even though they may be negative and they're just not pleasant. I'm wondering when do projections become pleasant? Do they become pleasant at some point?
We could. pain and pleasure go back and forth and shift places, and sometimes something that seems very pleasurable, if you do too much of it, gets painful. I'm sure we all have examples of that. Overdoing anything, you get painful, but maybe that's not what you're asking about.
Beyond bowing, do negative projections become pleasurable?
Like what?
Or when do they? Well,
Yes.
you mentioned when we have projections on people, things, and situations, and they're negative, and we're caught up in them, and
Yes.
we torture ourselves with those.
We
but
do.
Will those projections become enjoyable at some point when they're seen through?
Perhaps. I think I'm following you, but there's no guarantee of any kind of outcome in anything. The important thing is to see it. The awareness is to see that you're projecting. You may stop, you may not, but you may realize that those projections don't belong to anyone, that the projecting may still go on, but there's no projector anywhere. How is that said in the sadhana? Projections are not your own, or I can't remember how it's characterized.
Beyond bowing, and so is what you just described the idea of being in the front row of the movie theater?
Yes, you're sitting in the front row, and there's a stage of your mind is in front of you, and you just watch it. And occasionally you notice that because of the energy or the hope and the fear, the passion, the aggression, the ignorance that is happening with the characters, your thought patterns, your ideas, your imputation of someone you're talking to or you're going to talk to tomorrow, and all of that, you can get drawn right into it. You lose, to use the conventional word, you lose your objectivity. But you just have left the objectivity of, to continue to use that metaphor, the front row of the theater is pretty objective. So suddenly you find yourself as one of the characters. And that's also awareness. And just seeing that would put you in the front row to continue to use that image. It's not necessary to maintain it. It's always about returning to it. More?
Beyond bowing, I'm thinking of these balls of consciousness that you've been describing for a while now. And this metaphor of being in the front row, when you see yourself getting on stage, is that engaging in that wad?
I don't know if you can know that you're in the front row and you can know that you're on stage, but I don't know if you can see yourself moving onto that. That's the part that's difficult. So, and why? Because they're not different from each other. If they are, then we're right back to there's a relative self who can somehow become enlightened and be in the front row forever, something like that. You're welcome. Sir.
It just came to me, the line is, I've become fooled enough to think that I possess my own projections.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, from the sadhana of Mahamudra. There's some powerful lines in that sadhana. I possess my own, these are my thoughts, my ideas, as if there's somebody there. Yes, sir.
Shodo bowing. How do concepts trick us into thinking something that's pleasurable is painful and something that's painful is pleasurable?
I just think that it's, although you described it very simply, I just think it's just, it's very seductive into getting us to try to figure it out or think about how that happened and how we did that. And it's not that doesn't have relative value, but the fundamental understanding is just to see what this is right now, just see what this is. And this is why we practice sit down, hold still, face the wall, so that we're training our mind to whatever shows up, don't accept it, don't reject it, and don't ignore it. That's how. And it takes a long time. It takes a lot of returning to the wall, returning, in our case here, returning to the 3 jewels. You wouldn't have to have the 3 jewels or even sitting meditation, but probably need to do something to train your mind. Otherwise, the circus of the world it'll just put you to work. As soon as you see it, you're immediately on this ride or that ride, or you're running this machine or that machine, or you're taking down the tents, or you're putting the tents up, or you're loading on the train. I'm using image.
Just so much going on that we wouldn't even be able to necessarily be aware of.
Yes.
Do we use concepts to kind of try to get control over all that sensory input that's happening all the time?
Yeah. Yes. We name, or we, as soon as something happens that emotional, that is challenging or difficult, we might come right on top of that with ideas about who did it. The why question is all just practically immediate trigger. If we have any kind of feeling happening, even if it's a simple feeling like a stomach ache, why am I having it? We immediately look at various things. Not enough water. I ate too much, too many bowls of cereal. Just we look for why we are entrained into this relative situation, which works relatively. And we do have a relative dynamic that's happening. My hands are moving in this relative area that is an illusion as far as fundamental reality, but is real relatively. Things do come and go. More.
That was a good value. Question's not exactly clear, but if the basic situation is spaciousness and there's lots of sensory input, is the sense of claustrophobia in that the concepts?
There might be some structure there about the claustrophobia, but thinking around it that tightens that up and plugs all the holes and everything, so nothing can get in because your dynamic is so powerful. Some people are born with just the ability to think circles around the rest of us, and I'm not one of them at all. You might say, well, that's obvious. But I don't think, I think some, but most of the reason I'm in this position and you're out there is I'm looking at something. When I say I'm looking at something, you call it a realization or awakening or enlightenment, and none of those words really seem to fit anything. So I don't really even know what it is other than the words I've been using for a long time. It's not separate. I don't see anyone else. So it's the traditional expression of that is empty of other. First, there needs to be, speaking of it in a linear way, it needs to be some insight that there isn't anyone here. And if there isn't anyone here, then you continue to go and eventually you continue to practice. That won't give you enough confidence to sit up here. As far as I'm concerned, you have to see that there isn't anyone out there. I'm not saying there isn't something there, but it is an illusion. It is unreal. And it is this unreal. It's this unreal. Would I make a good actor, or you think I should not give up my day job? I mean, it's like that. I'm not going to do that, or no one should do that, but it's like that kind of emotion can be very, very intense at the same time you might have been practicing for 20 or 30 years. And with the idea that you must be improving, getting better. Maybe not. It's a spiritual path, not the mundane path of accomplishing anything. Yes, please.
That was a good bowing. What I want to know is if the fundamental situation is spaciousness and there's all the sensory input
Yes.
showing up all the time, what is the misunderstanding that that's overwhelming?
That space. This is space. This is space. Everything you see is space. There isn't anything. It has to be seen. And if it's seen, then you're at the mercy of everything. There's no longer a being here called Mozuku. or Jessica. No longer, never was, but now you realize that that's the case. And you begin to function in a very ordinary way. You wouldn't stand out in a crowd. More?
Mr. Bowing, are you saying the misunderstanding is thinking the sense that what's coming in through the senses is real?
That's, yes. You have this thinking that that's a real kotsu hitting a real tabletop, and relatively it is. But the relative truth, see how people who are working with relative truth trying to control it, see how that doesn't work, and we end up murdering each other, or at least making each other's lives very difficult just by making assumptions about that there's a separate person who has a separate feeling about that, or you shouldn't do that, or you should do this. I don't know if you could say it boils down, but it comes down to a very simple situation of self and other. This is unreal. We have to see it. Otherwise we fight and we hurt each other. Sometimes just a pinch, something like that, but still painful. More? Questions will help here if you can come in. I don't really know what to say. Yes, sir.
Is the desire to see through the concepts other than trying to get rid of the concepts?
Yes, that's the path. Trying to get rid of it is buying it as some kind of mercantile, where you can, or merchandising, where you can tit for tat. If I give this, I'll get that. If I do this, I'll get that. If I do this process, then this will happen. And this, a lot of spiritual paths, in particular, Buddhism is full of all kinds of processes, some of it, especially of Vajrayana, but also Zen, Chan Buddhism. Buddhism way back to the time of the Buddha is full of methods or ways to approach this, including a sitting practice of meditation. So it is about, again, it's about the awareness of what is coming and going. So you can actually see it. It's very much like watching a movie. A movie, it seems very real. You're entrained by it. You believe it. You believe in the movie. And if it's a really good movie, you even kind of forget you're in the room because you're kind of identifying with those characters in there. And when they're in danger, you can kind of feel. So at the same time, you know that you're in danger. At the same time, you know it's a movie. That's a good example of non-dual in the mind streams, watching a movie. Wouldn't you say? Or would you see it differently? Further question?
It just seems like wanting to see through the concepts is still wanting something else. So I'm just wondering how that's a different dynamic from wanting the concepts to go away.
It's just the singularity of it helps, because not only do you want to see this, but you are willing to waste a lot of your ego's time sitting and facing a wall. Ego does not like that, because you're sitting and you're watching something, and the ego in some way will try to get some kind of strategy around why you should sit differently, have a different technique, or you're sitting too much, sitting in the wrong posture, on all kinds of elaborations on the simple thing of sit down, hold still, observe. That's what it is, no matter what arises. No matter what. It's a big mouthful right there, because, well, no matter what, does that mean if my knee hurts, I shouldn't get up or move around? No, you should get up and move around. More about that if you have it.
What do you mean by the singularity of it?
Of meditation?
You said the singularity of, I wasn't sure if it was the intention.
Intention. Yeah, the intention. The intention, which is our way of talking about it, is a vow. A vow to, it's expressed in a couple of different ways, many ways, but the two that I talk about here is the vow to save all beings, which is the personalizing it, and the vow to be with all things, which means whatever shows up, you're there. You're not objecting to it. You're not agreeing with it. You're not believing it. You're not disbelieving it. You're not ignoring it. It's just awareness. It's just like being the room in which the things come and go. You see the things come and go, but you don't clamp down on any of them. You don't identify with them. You don't disidentify with them, and you don't ignore them. Therefore, you begin to see that it is an illusion. More? Good, thank you. Other questions? Have a few minutes if there are any. Yes.
Geez, I'm bowing.
Yes, sir.
How do we include the vow of others in all of these practices and activities? Bowing.
You mean
The vow to be with all things. Like, what role does that play in our practice in these intentions? Bowing.
so? I'm making some of an assumption about what you're trying to know or find out. And I'm going to say that anything that arises in front of you, whether it's an event, a tree fell over in the backyard, or your lawnmower won't start, anything that's an event is just received. You just receive it. You know, some kind of a discursive thought or analysis may show up around it and receive that. And the same thing as if a person walks around the corner, walks into the living room where you're standing and presents you with any kind of dynamic whatsoever, maybe scolds you for what you forgot to do for them. Anything that shows up is you receive that. So that's the way. Am I getting close, or you have if you have a specific question, help me out here, help us out.
Geez, I'm buying. Should there be any intention to bring ease into the lives of others?
Bring what?
Ease.
Of course, bring ease or kindness or serenity or whatever you can do, but it has to be, the person has to be ready for that. So, and the identity, we need to look and see if we're trying to get an identity out of, we might have some be accomplished and be able to not be quite at the mercy of our own causes and conditions giving us a hard time. And we might be able to make that gesture towards others, but we need to find out if that is complete generosity, rather just the first of the 6 paramitas. If it's complete, there's no one getting credit for it. You don't care whether it works or it doesn't work. It's just totally giving yourself to that person, that situation, that kindness. Without, it's like every time you see a person with a cardboard sign, you help them, or this is the other form, or you don't, because you're so clear about who you are and what is in front of you that you find you might help that person in one situation and might not help that person in the next situation, and not be able to put any words to it at all. Explain that you cannot write a book about that. If you do, then we're right back to a high level of relative truth where we're trying to do good and not do harm. In the 3 pure precepts of do good, don't do harm, and be with all things. If I have that correct. And then with some kind of a saying, see, this is how I know I did that, or I know I'm doing that. So am I closer? Is there
It seems, and my questions included, it's almost like, how do I tolerate others? And rarely is it, how can I be kind to others in the midst of my own negativity?
I think that some of the tolerance for others comes in no longer trying to get rid of your own suffering. A willingness, you could say, to just completely suffer forever. And see if you can do that, then when people present that part of the dynamic that you're referring to as how do I tolerate that, then you don't just see the otherness of what you're trying to tolerate, the polarity of it. You see deeply into it, and you see how much they're suffering and how much they cover up their suffering by their activity, by their threats to you or their dismissal of you, or any way they treat you. That's the way, because if they see what this is, they would never, they're not separate from you, so they would never be dismissive of anything, even without the vow, if they saw it. But it's unlikely they will see what they're covering up through the self-centered narcissistic aspect of the paranoid consciousness that is afraid or operating out of fear. More?
Jeez, I feel like this is going to be a little bit convoluted, but I'd
I
like
hope
to try
so.
to ask. It feels like so often any one of us may decide how to act based on how we feel. So because the feeling of kindness is not there, we just say, well, I don't have to be kind because it's not genuine. And just the most basic level of kindness, is there any intention to be kind regardless of how we feel about kindness? Bowing.
Yes.
Jeez, I'm bowing. What can we take our lead from when our emotions or thoughts don't align with kindness? Bowing.
Here it comes. Do it anyway. Because that non-aligning with kindness is Jabberwocky. It's ego commentary. Ego does not want to be seen. And even if it's if we've been looking at ego and we've suddenly seen with ego, as they would say in the 1940s, your slip is showing. They used to call that a Freudian slip. Your slip is showing. In other words, and ego does not want that to be seen. It will manifest powerful kindness or lack of kindness and justify it or validate it by some kind of thought process around that. Am I getting close? Yeah.
Jeez, I'm bowing.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do we work with this feeling that kindness should be transactional? Like someone should have to deserve our kindness.
So that's going to show up, and especially in the early stages. When I say early, I mean the first several years of practice, of intense sitting practice. It's going to be different for each person depending on the karma that you showed up in. Your consciousness was downloaded into this particular body-mind complex. So I would just receive it as it is, rather than push it away or try to act differently than what that is. It will work itself out as long as you return to prioritizing the awareness rather than what arises in the awareness, because what arises in the awareness has a relative construct that supports that other relative construct, which is belief in a personal self that can be right or be wrong, or can live or can die, and all that more.
Not yet, thank you.
Those good ones, please don't hold back. Thank you. Yes.
Beyond bowing on that, and like to use my job as a nurse as an example of a place where I maybe be kind, even though I don't want to, I do it anyways. There seems to be some sort of like pain that can come along with that doing it anyways, that being kind when you don't want to. What is that pain? Almost like, yeah, what is that pain that comes along with that?
Just pain. Not separate from anything. More?
Beyond bowing, is that the kind of suffering that you're encouraging us to go into, like the kind of pain that arises when, for example, being kind when you don't feel like it?
Yes. We don't really, it's not even your suffering. There's no personhood there. So when you realize that the suffering you've been going through there's no one getting a credential from that. There isn't anyone there. It's just suffering. It's dependently arisen. So it's the source, the direction, the momentum. You see it, but you don't do anything with it. You don't conclude things about it so that you can possibly get rid of it or blame someone for it. Even though there's a relative, I sometimes say, I don't know if I've given a talk on this, but even if somebody's actually offended you or hurt you or obstructed you, you can't really use that. If you use that, then you're buying right into that system, which literally billions of people that live by that. It's not wrong. It's just the relative world of right and wrong. But it's not. The spiritual path transcends this, transcends everything. More. Yes, sir.
Geez, I'm bowing. Can we still use relative knowledge to end an abusive situation or where you're being taken advantage of?
Oh, completely. Yeah, don't misunderstand. Thank you. Yes, you'll be more clear about that. You won't have an either or. You just won't do it. If you see someone functioning in a way that is abusive, if you're having to think and resist, should I interfere? If you're into either or, then I would say the best way to spend your time there is probably in front of a wall, so you can stop making assumptions about who this is and what that is, because that's the basic distress, this duality. But if you see if you're clear and you see what this is, you won't hesitate to stop someone abusing someone else or someone from abusing you. Won't talk to them anymore. Might cut the ties. Any number of things could show up more.
Geez, again, I know this is maybe a bit convoluted, but in my work with the community, the relationships that I see sometimes are abusive, but the one being abused is so confused about maybe this is love or maybe this is appropriate. So I'm wondering how one would work with a situation where it's not clear, but because you've been told that you're confused about a situation.
Give me the basic question.
I know it's a convoluted question.
It is, but I'm interested in responding if I can. Maybe I can't be helpful, but I
It
will
feels
try.
like your responses are really helpful for those of us that are in some sort of sane relationships to our communities and to our worlds.
Yes.
But how do we talk to somebody and empower them to make a decision or to see what is clear when they're constantly being told that their thoughts, feelings are invalid?
What do you think? You came up with a question. I think, let me say, I'm looking at it. I don't know how much I'm thinking about it, but it looks like the high end, it's a high end of the relative area of trying to figure something out. So it's already ready to flip into another angle or another dimension. And that's why it's necessary to just, common way to say this is hold your seat, just observe, don't do anything about it. If it's showing up the way you describe it, it's just about hold your seat, just observe, just whatever shows up, just receive. Am I getting close or?
And would that be the instruction for me as the objective or third party relating to whether it's one of the teens down in the library or anywhere else out in the community?
So again, or maybe the first time, you can't set up a standard there. I mean, we want one. Any of us who are suffering in a situation where the particular milieu that we're in could be a relationship with one other person, any of that, it can get extremely confusing. And of course, the confusion from the point of view of deep understanding, it's not confusion, it's wisdom. And what is the wisdom? It's receiving that situation. It's very easy for some aspect of the self-centeredness to come back in there and try to make sense out of it. Well, you can't do that because that'll show that you're caving into them, or you can't do that, or that'll show that you're going along with their craziness or their neurosis or something. You follow me? So I would say in that situation, as I'm understanding what you're asking about, less is better. But that doesn't mean you stop looking at them, listening to them. You might even ask more. If I'm trying to come up with some kind of a scenario around that, you might even ask more about that. Personalize it a little bit more to that. If it's an individual, is that what you're, yeah, just try to personalize it a little bit more. How is that showing up for you? Can you describe it in a different way? I often say, can you paraphrase yourself? It's not that I didn't hear what you said. It's just that I want to hear if you heard what you said. Because quite often I get questions that are just questions. They aren't coming out of someone's actual wanting to know something. I'm not saying you're doing that. Is that where you went with it? No. Good. Yes, sir.
Shoulder bowing. Can we see if we're giving someone ease versus just giving into their demands?
So they've got a polarity right there, giving into their demands. So that's a pretty strong character there to give. I'm not going to give in to your demands anymore. I've had it. So help me a little bit with this, because it sounds like a setup.
Shoulder bowing. I'm thinking of feedback I've gotten as a functionary is like to have interviews with people and to ask for feedback, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to do what they're asking. So they might think that it would make their lives easier if I just did what they were saying, but I might not do that.
Okay. What's the question?
I guess the question is, what is it to put some ease into someone's life?
Sure. The only response that's coming up for here from me is that don't meddle with them. Allow them, have respect for people's confusion or suffering. You may see that they're confused, they're misunderstanding, but that confusion, that misunderstanding that is coming up as a form of some kind of a structure or an opinion or a judgment or evaluation or description of how you were wrong or whatever. That's, especially if you're seeing that they're not really seeing what this is. It's probably just a cover up that protects them from their own fear, from their own just fear of the unknown, fear of emptiness, fear of being nobody, fear of being unappreciated, all of the various other things that could be pointed at there. So the ease that is being asked about there is probably not something you can particularly give to somebody, but you could at least not make things more difficult. They're already having enough difficulty witnessed by that they're trying to shovel some of that your way, blame you for how they're feeling by accusing you of this or that. And there might be enough relative structures in there where they could actually do that. And that you might have actually stepped on their toe at some point or said something, made some comment on something about them that may have some relative truth, or maybe from their point of view, may be relatively incorrect. How dare they say that kind of thing? They don't even know me. So they may be coming back. And so as far as giving them any kind of ease, maybe the best thing to do is don't fight, don't go to war, don't go to peace, take no position. And that quite often shows up as a practitioner as how you can't help but take a position. That's also awareness. It's not failure. It's a spiritual path. Everything you see show up on is a rock on the side of that mountain. It's not failure. The awakening itself is going to feel more like failure. You get to the top and you start to fall. And as has been said way before I got here, it's like falling, but what's different about it is you don't hit bottom. There's no bottom. Sir.
How do we receive the stuff that's being shoveled towards us when we see that that's what's happening?
Just with kindness. This is you might get close to the idea of ease there. It's if you say, thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever, you don't have to do that to them to try to get some kind of credential where they can see how kind and wonderful and generous and humble you are. But you might do it in your own mind stream. You might look, and I mean this seriously, you might look right in their eyes and say that, when I say that, in your own mind stream, not out loud, look right in their eyes and say that. You might also drop your gaze a few inches down below their eyes. Am I giving you a standard or a technique? No, this is a way of talking about it. You might not do any of this, but it's about softening up in relationship to an energy that's coming and wants to attack you because it's afraid. They don't know, someone who attacks you, they don't know they're afraid. Gang members or mafioso or all the people that follow crazy people in the world don't know that they're getting some protection out of worshiping the big guy, whether it's the one up there or the one across the room sitting in a courtroom. More about that if you have it. Let's go. Go there. Time's up. No, time's not up. Go, keep going.
I don't have a question, just an acknowledgement that I see that when someone shovels stuff my way, I'm already trying to shovel it back to them. Like, no, this is yours, take it back.
Yeah, me too. That's all I know about it. Nothing has to change. If you think something has to change, ego is totally on board with that. And it would get right back on the train that it just fell off from because you're sitting facing a wall. Everything starts to fall off. And then you leave the wall and you go back into your everyday life. And then the self-centered part of the mind gets right back on and starts protecting you from this crazy world and all the people who are wrong or abusing you. Yes, sir.
How can I both shovel it back to them but keep my mouth shut?
Yeah, awareness. Awareness, you won't know what to do, but whatever you're doing, whether it's sitting still or whether it's actually telling somebody that they're incorrect, that they misunderstand what's happening, which you could do that. I doubt that you're going to do it with some kind of a threat or something, but you may say that to someone. If there's a lot of emotional rumbling coming along, probably should not do much, because then there could be a lot of fire coming out. More? Especially anyone that hasn't asked a question. Take maybe.
Chishin bowing.
Go ahead.
If there is no bottom when we are falling, does it mean that we are falling forever?
I wouldn't get too outrageous about it. There is no forever. I mean, it's a concept, of course. You could say, if that helps you, then use that one. Or you could say 5,000 years you're falling, or 108 years. You see what I'm saying? When I'm saying falling forever, when you everything starts to fall apart, as Kobun was when he translated the Heart Sutra mantra, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. Nothing to do, everything all at once. It's that same kind of, everything comes apart and there's nobody left. And yet you've got all these feelings and emotions still running this way and that way, looking for a self, looking for a person that feels that way. An odd combination of things. Is that enlightenment? Is that awakening? I have no idea. I don't know, when someone way before I got here starts talking about enlightenment or awakening or realization, maybe, I don't know. It looks like what was being, when I study the teachings, it looks like what was being pointed at by my teacher, by both of them, and other teachers down through the centuries. Sometimes teachers down through the centuries don't, the way they present this isn't particularly the way that I would say or look at it. But it's not something we attain or some kind of state of mind where suddenly we no longer have any difficulty with anything. Very good. I think we can close. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Shoto, and I am a monk at Sokukoji, where I am committed to training my mind under the guidance of my teacher, Sokuzan. We rely on your support for much of what we offer here. This includes building projects to create space for full-time and part-time practice residents. Thank you for your help.